Anish, I know that the period of gestation, creation, construction and completion for this extraordinary sculpture that we're in was 2 years, which is incredibly intense. Did that generate what we see fundamentally, that taut, intensive process? Or were the seeds of this kind of work anywhere in your mind and the opportunity came along? So actually there was a lot of previous thought that had gone into what we're now experiencing.
Well, I made this, of course, with Cecil Belmont, who's not here this evening. But this sounds like it's got an echo, does it? It does. Can you do something about it, please? Whoever's... Thank you. So, yes, Cecil and I had worked together. I asked him to engineer Marcius for me at the Tate. And since then, we became friends, and we seem to share a certain common purpose, somewhere between object and the fantasy of engineering. So this is a kind of fantasy of engineering, this object. So the seeds were there. We'd fantasized about a tower, sort of. One never really takes those things terribly seriously until the moment arrives, until you're asked to actually take them seriously. And there's something there, I think, which is important about reality and the way reality, in the end, directs things, makes things happen in a certain time scale, in fact, forces them to happen in a certain time scale.
You said, I think we are quoted downstairs even, that the Tower of Babel was one idea, which is quite a potent notion for the Olympics. How conscious were you? How conscious did you let yourself be of this specific context, down there, the stadium that's being re-amended? And how much did you have to just try and work in terms of a structure, a sculptural structure?
Well, I mean, it's not anything if it isn't strange, this structure. What is it, a year and a half, 2 years on? It's still a strange structure. And I think its awkwardness was part of the equation, part of what I felt I wanted to deal with. Now, one might ask why. Talking about towers, first of all. There are lots of towers. There are towers all over the world.
A few out there.
Yeah, but almost all of them, in fact, I'd go so far as to say nearly every single one of them is an A structure. They're all, do that. So this half leans against this half and they hold each other up. There's good logic for it. There's even good aesthetic logic for it. Of course, what works physically also has poetic, aesthetic sensibility. So one gets that. We wanted to see if there was another way of building a tower. One thing I should say is that it wouldn't have been possible to engineer this, even though what you see is tubes, rings, 19th century fixtures and fittings. One couldn't engineer it, however, prior to the 21st century, before computers. So Cecil worked some kind of magic here with 19th century bits that allow us to make a bendy tube, none of which, in a way, on its own, is structural, but all of which together work as a structural unity.
I'm curious about that conversation. I mean, literal, metaphorical, the dialogue between engineer and artist. Do you start by coming up with the seemingly impossible and ask him how that can be made possible, or is it a more practical conversation that you have?
Okay, normally I would say the first, which is that I have the notion, go to an engineer and say, "This, I want to do this." In this particular instance, it's a collaboration. So we kind of allowed the thing to emerge out of certain thoughts. Now, Olympics are complicated because inevitably one of the things one has to deal with is this kind of symbol of national, whatever you call it, pride. or something like that. something like that. Oh, that's tough, because in fact it's exactly what I did not want to do. We proposed this thing amongst, there were 60 entries for this, and so I'm sure many of them were much more acceptable, if you like, in terms of that project. I'm astounded. Imagine Boris Johnson built this, or allowed us to build this. It doesn't seem possible in a way. So we I pushed against the idea of a kind of symbol.
Was that what the brief said? A symbol, a landmark?
It didn't say a symbol. It certainly did say a tower. It did say interactive. I'm interested in that. Interactive meaning public, and what does that mean? I'm interested in that. But I think there's all these other associated realities that one, you can either dodge them or play with them. I felt that somehow a problematic object would be a way of, or an uncomfortable. I say uncomfortable. I mean an object with all its elbows sticking out. I've said that about this thing before, and that's what it does. It is sort of awkward, and it's that interests me. Not on its own, but as one of the tropes.
I think there was the Telegraph that said something about it was spilling its guts, wasn't it? It was the bowels. I like your taut elbows out, a kind of visual spanner in the works, as it were. It has a very linear, fluid quality. And it feels like a drawing in space from some angles, and when one experiences in that way. And of course, sketching and drawing, you've shown us some of that process. Was that the first manifestation of it? Did you first put pen to paper? Or were you making models and thinking more technically?
Not thinking technically, but certainly models. There's this incredible thing you can do nowadays. I've made a very rough model, and then, of course, within a short period of time, you can put it into a computer program, and it'll extrude it and pull it in all sorts of different directions. Now, that's fine. I'm not a great fan of computer design as a way of coming up with a new idea, because I don't believe it really does. I think they always look as if they're made by a computer, and there is something problematic there. So I believe that one makes a model and then a drawing, or the other way around, and some more models and more models, etc., etc. But it was done incredibly quickly. And then we had what we thought was a proposal. And then, of course, you go through the process of having it costed, and it costs too much money. And then you've kind of got to make it into something else. The requirements, suddenly the requirements for this space, for the space, where is it, up there, those things emerge. There comes to, I came to realize that I was making, I wasn't really making a sculpture. I was also making a thing called an attraction, whatever the hell that is. It's very problematic. These things are very, very difficult because their status as objects is unclear. It's not a ride. I don't want to make a ride. It doesn't interest me, really. So all these problematic questions arrive, and of course the people who look after this object now and work with it on a daily basis try to get it to have a return. I'm talking about a financial return. It's complicated for them because I've given them something that isn't so straightforward. You come up to here to look at the view. It's a view of London you've not seen before. Dare I say it's not an extraordinary view. It's a view, But I think once in this weird process of so the status of this object, that's what I'm trying to talk about, I think, is the status of this thing. It's not a building, it's a sculpture, but it's not a sculpture fully. It's also doing this other thing. And I think that's part of the interest, is this we see in architecture around us and in sculpture around us that these let me call it a kind of theatricalization of sculpture.
Spectacle.
Yeah. So I see that, of course. So this object is very much part or forming something like that, part of that conversation about the way that an object is interstitial.
One of the things that interests me about the view you get from it, I find it extraordinary, but that's because I live near here and I'm interested in the industrial sublime or whatever.
So am I.
But you're right.
But you know what I'm.
Well, I do actually, because the question, the answer would be, well, it's no different from the view on the top of that tower block or the building over there or whatever. But there is a difference, and that is that our view from here is mediated, that might be one way of putting it, or framed by, or we're constant in our sites of reference, is the structure itself.
Yes, of course.
And that must have been a conscious decision.
No. Absolutely so. Absolutely so. That the structure, that view down there, I was very, you take so much of this room out by having that there. It's very important to be able to look down at it.
So that inside-outside void at the centre is a consistent theme, or one of the repeated themes in your work.
It is. It is.
Does a sculpture like this, I want to come on to the compromises you may or may not have had to make with planners and the Olympics authorities in a minute, but is something like this a conversation with and a battle with yourself? Is that one of the ways that you work as a sculptor?
Yeah, without a doubt. Of course it's a conversation, even a battle with myself, So
taking on Boris Johnson is a piece of cake then?
Well, it's a question of what the demands are. I hear tell that Boris wants to put a slide on this. What do you think? What do you think, guys? Anyone for it? I think maybe I should invite Carsten Holler to.
He can be the first down.
Yeah, he can be the first down it. But I think it's to do with the problem of participation. Historically, of course, we would look at an object and we'd participate, if you like, as witness, through our eyes or almost with our bodies. I think contemporary practice almost demands in some way that becomes completely physical. When you go up in a lift and into a space like this, and there's this question always about what are you participating in? I think you're participating in structure, of course. Upstairs, the room with the two mirrors, I kind of wanted it to be as if one was inside the lens chamber of a telescope or something. So the view's upside down, you're in it, you're part of it. The view out there is, in the room with you, etc., etc. And of course, downstairs, it's a dark canopy that sits above you, perhaps a little menacingly. Could have been more menacing, I think. But again, these are all to do with how a thing's made.
Obviously, there's all sorts of precedents, and you've mentioned, there are many towers. You have Eiffel Tower, and you've talked about attraction and spectacle, and obviously it's something one plays with, but something that you're also conscious of trying to, if not transcend, at least play with. Does there come a point, though, now, maybe it's happening now, it maybe will be in a few years' time, where you have to just let go and let the authorities do what they will with it? Or is that something that you will resist forever? And are there legal ways that you can control what happens to this? A work of art it's an interesting territory, isn't it?
Yeah.
What happens to a work of art when it's sold?
I
Nicholas will be making sure that when people buy from his stand at Frieze this week, there's a certain integrity realised. But there then comes a point where, can people do what they want with a work of art? I don't know. We try and ensure not. But how are you playing that?
As I drove up this evening, I said to myself, what are those red lights doing there, etc., etc. And then I had to say, I've got to let go. And you'd have to let go. I mean, and I think one has to have enough confidence in the object to really let it go. Our museums are full of ephemera. If things are important, we know how to preserve them, but they have to earn their cultural value. So you can't just, doggedly hang on to it and say it has to be like this, and it's too tiring. There's too much else to do in the world. Let it go. Let it go.
When you were conceiving of this and when it was finished, I mean, here we are sitting in here, a conversation, a kind of cultural forum. I mean, I remember coming up here during the Olympics, and it was a wonderful experience because there was an energy around here and the things were going on in the stadium and so on. But there was that kind of question in my mind: what would happen here? And it seems to me that presumably this is the kind of thing you'd like to see happening here. But is this possible? Can there be these kind of events regularly here, or will it be a place that's rented out for conferences or dining or drinking or whatever? Not that we're not doing a bit of that as well, but
I'm sure there'll be a bit of that. And projects like this cost a fair bit of money, and it costs a lot of money to upkeep, to keep it going and to look after it and all that stuff. But so it needs to show a return, and that's fine. I hope there will be, cultural events or whatever it is. Things taking part here. We'll see. We'll see. I think this is something the people who manage this are in the middle of trying to work out. It's complicated. This is a part of London far away from everything else. It's, if you like, one of the seeds of a new place. But that's all it can be, is one of the seeds.
Interesting, though. I mean, it is a long way away from the epicentre that is the Frieze Art Fair, but it's 20 minutes, isn't it, from the Central Line?
Yeah.
Jubilee Line.
Yeah.
In a minute, I think we'll be able to get to here from this site, or 200 yards over there, to Paris in less than 2 hours in a few years' time. There's a high-speed network going to the centre. I'm not doing a plug for this area, although I do happen to live not far away. But it is an area of London that, you're right, it was on the margins. Now the idea is it becomes more central.
Yeah.
And actually, I'm looking around, and so much of that Olympic Park has changed. The biggest statement in any Olympic Park is usually the stadium. That's now dropped by half. The orbit remains the same, but the orbit's grown in the last 2 years because the stadium has got down. So in a way, this anchors a place in a way that wasn't even evident at the time how it would.
So I say to Boris, where are you, Boris? But, come on, have some confidence in the fact that you've had the courage to build this thing. Have confidence in it. Let it do its job. However, that'll take a while, but it's okay. So there's I think I'm reflecting a pressure to show a return, which is a weird thing. I don't think they should charge people to come up here, by the way. It's £15. Well, that's complicated, too.
It is, yeah, but inevitable, I think.
Yeah, perhaps inevitable.
What does something like this, not that there is anything like this, but what does the orbit then do in terms of your career? Is this something you have to push to one side? Is this something that you are constantly now being asked to think about, if not versions of it? I'm thinking of, say, the Anthony Gormley syndrome, where, having done The Angel of the North, everyone seemed to want him to do angels in different parts of the world, the commissioners and so on. I mean, have you found that people want the orbit to be taken into different dimensions, or is it something that you've managed to, in a sense, leave to one side for the moment, and you'll come back to this kind of monumental creation soon?
The first one of these that I made was Cloudgate in Chicago.
Which you put it in the same dimension. It's a much smaller work, but you mean
it's not that much. I mean, it's smaller, it's less tall, but it's not.
Well, spatially, it's more resonant, I suppose, or as resonant. Sure.
Yeah. But it's bigger than, if you like, it's bigger than a normal sculpture or a regular whatever. You know what I mean? Of course, yeah. You know what I mean.
Well, it reflects the entire surrounding.
Yeah. So, after I did that, there was a lot of pressure to do more of them, and I've somehow resisted it. This couldn't be more different in a way. What galvanizes me is the idea of participation. I mean, the fantasy that's represented by the Tower of Babel is that it's a communal project, that it was, if you like, built in vanity, but built by everyone in vanity, built by a community in vanity, to a common aspiration. Now, I think there's something in that about our will to take part, to be part of, to bring in, a bigger forum that I think has magic to it. Can one artificially make that happen? I mean, can the imagination, if you like, make that happen? My instinct is yes. It's all about the imagination. Complicated, but I think that's part of this, part of the fantasy of an object like this.
This, because of various constraints, because of various parts of the process of making it and the commission itself, I would imagine that you would have to think more closely than you do certainly for other public work you've made, and certainly for work that is to be shown in galleries, about the way your audience will interact with it. Can you, in a sense, still try and put the public choreography or how the public respond to this to one side when you're making it, or does it intrude more than any other work? I mean, there's physical things like lifts and stairs and health and safety and views and vistas.
All that stuff. But putting all that stuff aside,
is that how you do that?
I have no problem whatsoever with the question: what is it about? What is it for? It doesn't seem to do anything. I have no problem with any of those things, and I don't believe I should. I don't believe. I mean, a little bit of what the hell is this? I don't think is any bad thing, because it insists on the viewer's ability to find their own sense of what that can be, assuming, of course, that it's there in the first place. And they do, frankly, and one does. As a viewer myself, I know I do. So I think it's to do with how you go about meaning. Is meaning a linear process? It's over there. I'm going to go for that. Or is it, in fact, a much more complex kind of process that arises out of events, let's say, along the way? And I'm sure I believe in the second of those.
So most of your art is, if not a specific search for meaning, the process turns out to be a journey of discovery. That's a terrible cliche, but it's something akin to that.
Yeah, I mean, meaning isn't a pursuit, it comes to be. And I'm the kind of artist I am anyway, that's what interests me. In a post-Freudian world, in a post-Freudian environment, how could it be otherwise? Let's say there's this kind of reflection, dialogue between the baggage we carry and the things we look at.
I'm glad you mentioned Freud. I was going to bring up Jung actually, but I'm curious where the self is for you in a lot of your work, or is that an impossible question to answer because certain works are much more embodied in yourself, or that one could even see them as a distant form of analysis, self-analysis, and others have a very distant connection with the self? Or is there some consistent part of yourself that you feel is present in most of your work?
I wonder what Judd would have said to that. Donald Judd.
I never would have asked him. And
He
you may
would
then
never
say,
have asked him.
why would I ask you? And it's because I saw in those, when your earliest work or your earlier pieces, Jungian archetypes. You just mentioned post-Freudian world. And I've always thought there must be an element of a referencing of that. And I don't know whether it's done from a totally detached viewpoint or whether there are moments where the self is for you is strongly present in the work. But you're quite right to point out, John.
Okay, okay. You know, I've
Your game.
I'm no longer, but I have been I was in psychoanalysis for 20 years. So.
Sorry, no,
No, it's okay. I wouldn't talk about it unless I wanted to. And it's a process that's always deeply interested me for all sorts of reasons. It's the way it pertains to art is also of great interest. You know what you do when you are with your analyst is you either sit there or lie there, and all this stuff comes out because you can't help it. And then there's a process through which you very carefully look at what's happened, and that can take years. But you look at what's happened, and you look at it again and again and again, and slowly it distills itself. It isn't a direct process of healing. It's a process of observing, and all the other stuff happens or doesn't happen. You can't make it happen. I think making art's not very different in a way, in the sense that you might have a few colors and a few bits of stuff and mix them together, and then you watch what happens. It isn't art yet, but it's in that process of watching it and reflecting on it and understanding perhaps its relation to other things, that something emerges. And then one might make another move, and then maybe it becomes art. So it's that reflective process. I think it's the quality of reflection that makes it into a work. Now, is that, you know, where's the self in that? To try and answer your question. I've often said, you know, that I have nothing to say as an artist, and I really do believe that. There's a difference, in a way, between pursuing a meaning, pursuing the self. In other words, I'm certainly not autobiographical. You know, I'm not Tracy Emin, in other words. I'm not looking for a direct route to the self. Yet, is the self avoidable? Well, certainly not. And I hope that Judd wouldn't answer differently, frankly. You know, at the end of that cycle, one would say that even Judd would have to acknowledge somewhere that in that utter denial of self, if you like, that apparently is the work, there's other processes that happen. Who knows?
Reflection's interesting. I mean, that was a very reflective answer, and physical reflections there in the work too. I wonder whether it's just the critic, curator, commentator's glib way of making sense of a career to see it in terms of staging posts or landmarks, but that's often how exhibitions are perceived. But whether or not a work like this is, it's a physical landmark, but whether or not it functions as a kind of landmark or staging post in the way you reflect back on your career. It's one of those moments where certain things coalesce or certain things are then made possible in the future.
So, I'm not sure what you're asking me there, quite.
I suppose how you perceive...
This work?
No, how you perceive... When you look back over your career to date, do there seem to be works of greater significance than others? I suppose that the answer to that must be yes, but whether or not that's the easiest way to summarise and to think about a career, and that a work like this is very much part of that.
Okay. I think I see, I think what I've done over a few years is evolve one or two languages, actually 3 or 4 languages. One of them might be the language of, you know, pigment pieces, void works, mirror works, etc., etc., etc. And I might work in various materials in order to pursue the overall language. So I might make a void work out of stone just as well out of fiberglass or out of pigment, is what I'm trying to get at. So this work sits with all those stretched forms. Tarantantarab was the first one that I made at the Baltic, and then Marcius, etc. This sort of attenuated, pulled form. Now, this one happens to go in a loop, but it sits within, for me anyway, it sits within that language. And the language is one where form, if you like, is involuted. Forms, I'm deeply interested in it, still am. I feel that the next, if you like, if the modernist adventure as represented, let's say, by Brancusi is upwards and onwards, the rocket and so on and so forth, are at least my post-Freudian, to use it again, version of modern form is inside out, is involuting, is kind of processing, is towards darkness. It's not, sitting in the cave looking out at the light, but rather looking at the back of the cave at what's dark and a little bit difficult and sticky, gooey and shitty and kind of problematic. And so I see this as sitting in that body of work and sitting amongst evolving languages. I feel that, especially as a sculptor, that all those languages are open for me. And my endeavor is to try and open new ones rather than close old ones down. So I hope I can make void forms or mirror forms in new ways rather than close down the language and say, oh, I've done that, I'm going to do something else.
That was a very eloquent no to my question, actually. And the Brancusi, it's very interesting, the Brancusi endless column. In a way, this is the endless column that devours itself, isn't it? It keeps going on, it never ends because it's continually joined up and onwards it goes. Very interesting. So, where next in the public realm? Are you in a position where you can talk about what you're going to do next? I don't know. I haven't spoken to you for a couple of years about what you're doing. So this is a genuine question, not one of those arch questions where, I know you're going to reveal something. But I think people are very curious. Having seen something like this, it's now settled in, the world around it's being transformed, here we are. What are you doing next in the public domain?
What am I doing? I have a couple of things, or at least,
Or can you not talk about
them? No,
things?
it's not that I can't talk about them. It's that for every 10 projects, I'll be amazed if one happens. What I am doing is publishing a book. It's about that thick, of unmade projects. That's my pride and joy. I'm serious, because it doesn't matter, in a way, whether they're built or not. What matters is that one has the chance to if you like, occupy the territory. Imaginative territory. So unmade projects, it's fine.
And it's a fascinating idea because I guess one of the things about being an artist is the creative freedom in broad terms to do what you want to do. And one of the things I think, one of the tropes that's around a successful artist is that you can almost do exactly what you want to do. Now the territory that you're...
Is that really true?
Well, no, it's not. But I think in the studio there's a sense that one can do as much, to a certain extent, you can do what you want to do. But I think it's really interesting that the territory that you're occupying, which is this language of engineering and architecture too, that I love that phrase, between shit and architecture was another series, but let's save that perhaps. But that there are many, many unrealised projects that you have devised and that can't get created because it's in the public domain and there's certain restrictions and so on. So I think it's a very interesting area.
But I think what it does is for me anyway, allow me to excavate this area which lies, I think, in this uncomfortable space between architecture and sculpture, between participation and what's the word? Standing back and looking.
Passive.
Yeah. So somewhere there, it feels to me that there's a real imaginative possibility.
When you were growing up, when you decided that you wanted to be an artist, did you always have that blurred or expanded idea about the possibilities of what you might do? I mean, it's interesting that in some of your earliest works, the pigment pieces, there's a definite blurring of the language of painting and sculpture, which is, I mean, beautiful. But did you always think in those, I don't think your thinking's ever blurred, but did you always think across category, I think, is what I mean?
I don't know how to answer that, Tim. What I've discovered, though, is, I mean, as I keep saying, I don't know.
But when you went to art school, do you think I want to be a painter or a sculptor?
No, I don't know. Something like that. No, but I will tell you this, that there are things that come out of working. One of the things I think I've discovered out of working is that the space of painting is this sort of ineffable space beyond the picture. The painting I'm interested in anyway. It sort of does this incredible thing. It's like looking at the sky. It's incredible. But can objects do that? Can objects be ineffable? Can this noble, tangible, fully conscious, if you like, fully real thing also be unreal? And I think that's something that I tumbled into. And I mean literally tumbled into. And the more I think about it, the more I know that it's the place to be. It's the thing to do. As our world is, if you like, got more and more material objects, what about immaterial objects? So in 3D, though, in the three-dimensional world, it's a weird contradiction that doesn't it doesn't allow proper full manifestation. And I think, as Bruce Nauman says, the artist reveals mystic truth. I think there is something mystical about that, even though you can't wake up in the morning and say, I'm going to do something mystical today. You can't. But what you can do, and I think it is true, that it takes a long time to make an artist. Maybe a lifetime's not long enough to really make an artist. And what artists do they don't make physical things. Artists make mythological things. And it's that mythology that takes a long time. That's why it takes a long time to make an artist, if that's not too vague.
Rather beautifully put. Other questions for Anish that you'd like to ask? Just for the taste. It's about colour. Was the colour an obvious colour for you to work through?
I made a lot of red things. I do red. I don't know why.
That's slightly disingenuous, because I'd read that you changed the tone by 1 point on this. Yeah.
I did. I wanted it to be a particular kind of red with quite a lot of blue in it, but it's why? I mean, they weren't too happy with me when I made the decision, because everything in the park was black and white.
Or wooden.
Or wooden, it's true, or wooden. You mean real natural materials. I've never believed in truth, especially not in sculpture. There is no truth. No, there's deep truth, only mystical deep truth.
Question there.
Hi, Anish. I was just wondering, as you know, with Olympic Park, half the buildings were taken down or they're turned into housing, schooling. Was that a part of your brief when you were building to, it has to be, representative during the Olympic, whatever, 2 or 4 weeks, but then it also has to grow with the area as the area redevelops from the Olympic Park? I was wondering how you thought about that.
One of the very, very difficult things of a situation like this, you build an Olympic site, legacy is always a problem, always has been in all these sites all over the world. Now, I think they've tried very, very hard and been, I think, thoughtful and careful about how to build a legacy on this site. Now, I expect it'll take quite some time. But the idea here was to have this be part of so-called legacy. When I made the piece in Chicago, I was told that the term of the work was 1,000 years. That's a last 1,000 years. I love that. Now, of course, whatever. But thinking of the long term, in a way, was part of the reason for awkwardness. I just felt that somehow that was... So this is very naughty of me, in a way, as well. But I felt that was part of the discomfort. It has a strange quality of time in it. It's like the pea in the mattress. It's always there to bother you.
It was interesting you said the pea in the mattress. I mean, the mattress has got smaller and the peas remain the same size. I was looking down there. I mean, the transformation's nearly taken place. It's been reduced by half, and it was a very admirable vision.
I don't think it's actually been reduced by. Oh no,
yeah.
Some of the
level of the stables.
Yeah, I understand. Yeah.
And actually, that was always what was going to happen, and that's quite admirable. But in a sense, it's as if the history of what happened there has been taken away now, and then it's being reconfigured. Whereas, in a sense, the consistent thing about the park now is orbit.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is something we suffer from, all of us, in many ways. Cultural confidence. Why the fuck do we have a confidence to build a stadium that's going to be there for as long as the stadium needs to be there, rather than this sort of halfway house between? I think we really need that. We believe in where we are, don't we? Don't we?
I suppose the answer would be that because they don't want people rattling in there like peas in a mattress. But you're right.
But I think that is part of the problem. It's that you can't always hedge your bet. And, other ages had confidence, but does ours not? I'm not particularly using the stadium, as an example, but I think this is something that, of course, we're building modern edifices all over the world, but do we build them with that centered clarity? I often doubt it. Mm-hmm. I think I would have been a little more uncompromising about usability. I don't care if there are toilets or not. I don't care if these rooms are here or not, frankly. So, in the end, one does kind of have to bend to that. Would I have made it bigger? Yes, probably. Is that a good thing? Maybe. I'm not sure about whether it'd be a good thing to have made it bigger. I went while I was halfway through this, I went to the Eiffel Tower and I stood there and thought, my God, look at the size of that thing. It's just unbelievable. This comes up to the first level, where you so, pathetic little thing in a way, even though it's a big thing, 1 to 10. 7, 8?
7, okay.
What would you give it? No, Come on, answer.
I'd give it 9.
Oh, would you? Oh, good.
Because I think it will have this. Now, that's got to be a good thing.
I mean, people have written about it rather nastily.
Not me,
no. No, not you. Not yet, anyway. But people have written about it rather nastily. And I must say, I'm not bothered by that at all. Honestly, really not. Because I think it takes time. I think it is awkward. I know it's awkward. You don't tell me that. But that's the point, in a way. So isn't it amazing, though, that in Britain today, Boris Johnson and all those wonderful people, that they let it happen? Isn't it extraordinary? It really is extraordinary, I've got to say. So, chapeau to them, really. Yeah.
One of the interesting things about living near it is that it's never familiar, because whatever angle you look at it from, it changes, and you can't quite grasp it. It's that idea that people like David Smith and Gonzalez talked about, I think, where as you walk round a work, it reveals itself in different ways. It's not knowable only from the front. And you can say what you like about the Eiffel Tower. It's a wonderful structure, but it never changes in the way you perceive it.
Correct. So that is a question then, isn't it, about whether all sculpture becomes image. You know, at what point does it become image? It's perhaps unavoidable, but in the process, is it, you know, those singularities can be broken down, and I think it's about breaking them down. Or this one of the things that interests me is this thing of the broken down image.
Or the broken down
Or
glass.
the broken down glass. Well timed. Well timed.
Right, one more question, then we must finish for drinks. Does someone have one? Yeah, sorry.
To me, so many of your works have this tactile quality, whether it's a reflective surface or an extremely intense pigment. And despite the fact that we can actually, enter this sculpture, do you think that the monumental nature of it makes it more difficult for viewers to interact with?
Yeah, I'm going to answer you slightly obtusely by saying this. Richard Serra, who's a sculptor I hugely admire, has often said that that what matters about sculpture, and I'm paraphrasing him, so he'll forgive me, or maybe not, but anyway, but that what matters about a sculpture is its mass, is its volume, and that the skin of an object is irrelevant to it as a thing. Now, I fundamentally disagree. It's the skin of an object, that the skin meaning the very outer thing of an object that defines its reality in the world. So it's only microns that make an object, that make a piece of steel mirrored, if it's steel. And I think even in Richard's work, the skin of an object counts. The skin of his objects count for quite a lot. So it's a roundabout way of answering or trying to get to something that you talked about there, which is tactility. We get it, if you like, from a strange combination of form and skin. And that's something I've always been fascinated by, because it's one of those things that sort of says, you know, come here, come and look at me. It's got something about intimacy written into it. And I think art's, pretty good at intimacy, pretty good at this, come here thing. This object, it's doing something else. It's not quite. We're going roundabout in a circle. I'm going to answer by saying that it does it in a different way. It's a different kind of thing. Sorry.
Nice question. Not many people go head-to-head with Waldemar Januszek and Richard Serra in the same evening, but Anish has just done that very successfully. Let's finish now. Let's have a drink, but feel free to go to the next level. And those of you on the coach who were, I think, that might have got the impression that you can't walk down the sculpture, you can, and feel free to, even on a wet night like this. But join me in thanking Anish Kapoor. Anish, thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.